Welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for December 20th, 2017. Does anybody have any announcements they wish to make before we get to the agenda?
I've sent a pull request on async iterators. So if you want to tinker with it and so on, please give us some feedbacks. It was a long-waited feature. So now that Node v8 6.3 landed, we can actually have them. I passed it in the chat, Rich, for the logs, for the notes. That's just about it.
Okay, and I'm sorry, you said it was an async iterators PR?
Yes, async iterators PR, yes.
Okay, great. Let's move on to the agenda. Thank you for that, Matteo. The first issue is build. This is in the Node repository, pull request 14795. Update the minimum kernel version to 3.10.0. I don't believe this is urgent, and we were hoping to have either Ruben Bridgewater or Gibson Fonstock for this, or maybe both of them. Neither of them are here, so I would propose that we table this for the next meeting. Does anyone feel otherwise?
I'm fine tabling this. Just one thing that I think as a whole we probably need to figure out is our compiler support story. And while build has partial ownership over this as far as like what's living in our infrastructure, I think we can maybe be a little bit more intentional about how we want to support compilers, which compilers we want to support, and how that may change over LTS and whether or not we're going to maintain support. I know this is going to be important, especially when we think about like our dependencies and what compilers our dependencies support. I think this is something that would be good to be intentional about.
Cool. Miles, I tried to capture that in a single sentence in the Google Doc. If you want to expand on it, if I didn't accurately represent what you stated, please go ahead and edit that. Any other comments on this before we move on to the next issue, or something we need to discuss about this? Cool. All right. In that case, we'll leave this on the agenda for next week, and hopefully we can talk about it there. Although, as always, if we can get it done in GitHub before then, even better. Okay. So the next issue is all the remaining issues are in the TSC repo. The next issue is issue number 444 in the TSC repo. It is to propose a new TSC meeting schedule. The current proposal is to keep it the same as the existing schedule, except for this meeting, the one we're having now, will take place 3 hours later. That will be a significant improvement for 5 TSC members, including a few members in underserved time zones, China and Eastern Australia. It will be a little bit worse for some folks in Europe, including 2 people who are on the call today, Franzi and Matteo. But I would like to tweak the schedule this way, starting with January. And we don't have enough people here to right now. Today we have 9, I think, CTC members on this call. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yes, and we would need 11 to make this change. However, if we can get as many ayes and nays and abstentions as possible already noted, that would be wonderful by me. Does anybody else have something they'd like to say about this?
So just to verify that I'm following everything correctly, because it's moved back and forth, we'd now be keeping all of the same times, except for this time, which would move forward 3 hours.
That's right. This time will be 3 hours later than it currently is. So, so for you, instead of noon, it will be 3 p.m.
That makes sense. The only thing that I'm curious about, and I know that we're doing this algorithmically and programmatically, would be the time that is noon, like 12 o'clock UTC. I know that that's a meeting that tends to get not a lot of people showing up. I recognize that this is because we're optimizing for people who generally have meetings in not great times. But I was curious if perhaps that time might be flexible, just like literally asking the 5 or 6 people who are in inconvenient time zones if that is the most convenient time for them, rather than just sticking to what's in the spreadsheet.
Yeah, that's a possibility. I had some other thoughts along those lines about which actually I'm going to take it back to GitHub, but you know, if yeah, actually your proposal is a good one. I'm going to stop talking. I don't need to talk about this. You're right. That's a good idea.
Yeah, just like the short of like my major concern would be that since all of us are being reflected in the algorithm, that perhaps that other time is just still not fair.
Go ahead, Nikita. Were you going to say something?
Yes, I wanted to ask you, what do you think about sharing the code, the JSX, the optimal times in the TSC repo itself? So if someone propose changes to the algorithm, they could do that in the repo.
Yeah, I can do that. There's a gist where I have the code, but I could check it into the repository. Maybe I should perhaps create a tools directory in the TSC repo and put it there. Does that sound like a good place for it?
Sounds good to me.
We also have Node core utils. It could potentially live in that as well.
Sorry for the dead air. I'm trying to take some minutes while doing this, and I need to capture Miles's thought, which was that whether the 12 UTC time works for the people for whom it is supposed to work. Okay, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, and we have a few more attendees arriving. This is good. Hey, we now have 11 people, so actually, in theory, we could pass this if everybody's in agreement with it. Although I don't know if that's actually the case. So I guess, first of all, I'd like to call for a vote. Does anybody second that or object?
I mean, do we really need to vote on it? But sure.
Okay, cool. So everybody in favor of moving this meeting forward 3 hours, if you could +1 that in the chat. And if you're opposed to it, if you could -1 it. And if you really don't care either way and you abstain, 0 it. That would be really awesome. Okay.
Rich, quick one. Gibson just pinged me. He's available now if we want to go back to that issue.
Sure. Why don't you send him the link to the meeting?
Yeah, got it.
Well, thanks. Okay. And again, sorry everybody for the dead air. I'm recording votes right now, and I'll be done in just a second, hopefully. And then we will move on to the next issue because we do not have enough votes to pass this, but we're getting a good start. Colin Jeremiah, 7, 8. Jeremiah's +1. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're missing 2 people. Oh, missing me, and we're missing Trevor. I'm guessing Trevor joined late enough that he probably does not want to weigh in on this at this time. Is that accurate, Trevor? Oh, +1. Hey, there we go. Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So I'll figure out what that means, take it back to the issue, and we'll go from there. Gibson has joined us. Okay, so unless anybody objects to it, I'm going to say let's go back to the build issue so we can use Gibson's time effectively. So we're going back now. Again, unless somebody objects, please speak up or say something in the chat. We're going back now to node issue 14795, which is update the minimum kernel version to 3.10.0. And Gibson, are you prepared to, are you, well,
yeah, I can give a quick summary, although...
Awesome. Please go ahead.
Okay, so basically we have yet, like since the IIJS merge and stuff, we haven't really ever gone through and said, when do we stop supporting things and how do we tell people that before, it's too late? So basically we still support an older version of the kernel, and we need to work out when is the right time to drop it. And of course, given that we're going to support an LTS version for 3+ years, we need to work it out well in advance. So start this discussion for Node 8. And basically the point was that there's still going to be quite a few platforms, not least Rel 6, which are still in support for the whole lifetime of Node 8, so it was kept. The question is now, when do we drop? Do we drop for Node 10, basically? Or do you want to consider dropping it before Node 10 goes out? So, and the dates. Node 10 goes end of life in April 2021, and apparently CentOS 6 is around till the end of 2020. So correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, possibly Rod, but I think that means we'd have about half a year where CentOS 6 is end of life and Node, we're still supporting it, which of course means that if there are problems, then we start to run out of ability to provision machines or test or even build in some cases. So the question is, when do we land this, and do we land it before 10.0.0?
Do we have any dependencies other than libuv that have a specific kernel version that needs to be supported?
I'm not sure anyone else notes it particularly. I mean, V8 obviously do, but once we don't tend to update after we start, right? We don't have many native dependencies. I'm not aware of anything else that's stated. Let's say that.
Yeah.
And is there, apologies for not tracking it more carefully in the actual issue, but is there consensus on the build working group to make this change? And the dispute is external to the build working group?
I'm not sure I'd say there's consensus. Rod's
not here, it's the Phantom.
Oh, he's organized and disappeared. Okay, great. I think there's still a bit of uncertainty about how to organize this, and the build working group isn't sure whether it should be making recommendations or it should be making decisions and TSC should be ratifying or what. Basically, it's all a bit up in the air. Yeah.
Sorry, one more question.
Yep.
If libuv is the main dependency that has a kernel that is set on a kernel version, why is it that Node would need to use a newer kernel version?
It wouldn't necessarily. So part of this is we can continue to build on an older version of the kernel than we say we support, because then if we have to update, we've already told you, like when 10 goes, when we start running 10, we can start on an old version and bump it up, as long as we are clear to people that this is what we say you should be running on, right? So if we say don't use CentOS 6 for Node 10, we can still build on it for a while, and then that gives people extra time to move off, but they know that they're on an older version and updates might not continue to work, like even minor or patch updates.
But that's where I'm getting confused. If the only component that has a strict kernel version is libuv, and libuv, I mean, unless we're planning on updating libuv to v2, right?
Sure.
libuv is going to be at 2.6 for forever. So what do we gain by this?
So I think the things we tend to hit are more like errors when new things don't work anymore. So like you have to update GCC, and that requires a new bugs in libc that people have hit. There are problems where we just can't provision machines anymore, like to build things because they're end of life. I think there's also a question of there's a difference between the minimum we could theoretically support and what we should recommend for people, right? So this isn't necessarily everything you can use. So we have an experimental level. If you look at the supported platforms, this is tier 1, which is, you should be completely safe running this. And there's an experimental version, which is earlier versions of the kernel.
So
I don't really want like CentOS 5 at tier 1.
Okay, so what I hear is that the bumping the kernel version is almost like being used as a catch-all for wanting a newer libc and that stuff you said. I don't understand why like each one can't be dealt with independently, where we say, okay, now we're just going to support a newer glibc, or
so
we're no
for example,
longer going to officially support this.
If we wanted to take a newer, so GC49 is what we say we need to build Node 10, well, Node 9 and upwards. That you can't get that by default for 32-bit Linux on CentOS 6, which is I think the only thing we have that is still the oldest kernel version, which we need to build on. So you then have to either start compiling your own GCC or like doing other stuff. They do tend to tie together. What you can get on this OS is, which libstandard C++, which GCC, which tool chains. That makes sense.
I think it makes sense to me to move it off of tier 1 support. Also, I mean, I wonder if this shouldn't actually be the build working group's decision, because, I mean, I feel like we're kind of at their mercy for doing this work anyway. So if they're not able to maintain an older test machine because they don't have the time, then we're kind of stuck with that anyway. So what's the point in us making that decision necessarily, right?
Yeah, maybe the answer is for the TSC to say, punt it to the build working group, unless, and if people have objections, then we can kind of raise it. But other than that, yeah, and maybe a general policy is what's really needed. Like, okay, well, when this goes end of life, it goes into experimental, and then we support it as long as we can, and then when it breaks, then we stop. Maybe that's the kind of thing we should be doing. So I can propose that if that makes sense.
It looks like that's getting support in the chat window on the right there.
Okay.
So does that give you a clear path forward?
Yes. Let's say yes.
Cool. I have a favor to ask. I'm really sorry. I forgot that I wasn't just supposed to be chairing the meeting, but also supposed to be taking notes. So I didn't take any notes during that conversation. So
I'll update the yep.
Yeah, if you could update the Google Doc, I would super appreciate it. And I'm really sorry about that.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Anything else, Gibson, or anything else? Anybody else on this topic?
I don't think so.
Great. Let us move on. So, right, next topic, and hopefully I'll remember to take notes this time rather than make somebody else do it, is TSC issue number 443, Mentorship Initiative Ramping Up. This is Michael Dawson's issue, and he put it on the agenda. And I propose tabling it until he's back, although it really just seems to sort of be informational. There's a link in that issue, and you can just follow that link so you're aware of what's going on. Does anyone want to talk about this, or should we table it for 2 or 3 weeks from now when Michael Dawson's back?
I have some really quick stuff to add. So I don't know if anyone's had a chance to read through it. I took like a quick look at the process and talked to Dan Shaw about it as well. My thoughts on it right now were mostly that the process seems really well designed and thought through. The person who put this together is someone who's been involved in Outreachy for a while, which is one of the programs that we've done mentorship with. The biggest thing to look at quickly is you can see there's a graphic, and kind of the process is talking about like which projects within Node want to work in the mentorship program and identifying the mentees. So I kind of went through Dan and did an exercise of what that may look like. And the main working group that was identified as good for mentorship, I thought was going to be benchmarking. But I think for those of you who are in working groups that may want to have mentees, maybe streams for you, Mateo, or Build, for Gibson, who's still on the call, it'd probably be good to review this document and see how it could be successful. I know originally as a TSC, one thing that like I had suggested to us was having a mentorship program where all new collaborators get mentors. And so that's like one example of identifying a mentee and mentors. And so just in general, I have a feeling like as the TSC, if we want this to be successful, we should make sure that we're engaging in this process early. That's it.
Okay, I think I took better notes this time, which is to say that I actually took notes. Any other comments on this? Okay, I think I don't think there's any reason to take it off the agenda. I mean, I don't think we want to do that without Michael saying okay anyway, since he's the one who put it on. So we'll leave it on for next week and probably skip it then too, because I don't think Michael will make it next week either. But yes, let's look at that GitHub issue and be aware of what's going on. Okay, the next issue, there's the standing issue of strategic initiative updates, so I'm just going to read these off. The moderation working group is still trying to work out how we get the necessary privileges in the near term to actually perform moderation tasks in the GitHub organization. So you can see the discussion in the Node.js/admin repo in issue 33. I'm likely to put that issue on the TSC agenda soon to try to get some definite resolution one way or the other. Okay, so Michael Zazo reports that V8 6.4 is ready to land on master. It's still not part of the stable channel, scheduled for January 23rd, 2018. Miles reports that document guidelines for accountability. Oh wait, no, that's not what Miles reports. That's a whole other issue. Okay, any other strategic initiative comments or reports from anybody?
I think for under the streams thing, the moving to or the allowing for experimental work on async iterators with streams kind of falls under that sort of broad thing, as that will be playing a future part in that development.
Thanks, Jeremiah. I'm not sure I caught that or how to summarize it, but if you could hop in the Google Doc, I just typed the words Jeremiah : streams, and if you could just sort of flesh that out, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Anything else, anybody, about strategic initiative updates?
Yeah, 2 quick ones from me. If you take a look at pull requests under the TSC, one that's open right now is an initiative refactor. And I just noticed I spelled the initiative wrong, so I fixed that as now properly spelled initiative refactor. It restructures the way that the initiatives are laid out. They're no longer laid out in a table, and it introduces a new concept of a stakeholder. The idea of a stakeholder being, someone who is actively involved in an initiative who is not the champion. This was an external request from someone who was specifically asking about how they better figure out, who are the stakeholders on specific initiatives, like who are the people who speak of authority, or more so like who should they be reaching out to collaborate with. And originally when the initiatives came out, I was thinking that maybe it didn't make sense for the only for the champions to only be TSC members, and introducing the stakeholders here, allow other collaborators and potentially non-collaborators to also, join. So it was requested of me to create a better definition of what a champion and a stakeholder is, as well as, just kind of following through on that. So just kind of to anyone in here who is a champion right now, and if you have people who you think might be good stakeholders for the initiatives you're working on, please add a comment and I'll add them to that update. And then also, when I update the copy in there with some definition of what a champion and a stakeholder is, review of that would be really appreciated.
Cool, thank you.
And I guess, sorry, Rich, one more thing. Quickly to the room, if anyone could answer, do you have a problem with stakeholders not being committers?
No, I have no problem with that.
So long as they're doing something towards it. And not just sitting there and like poking at people, telling them what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the only like 50-50 I had on that would be like, I almost feel like if we feel comfortable enough nominating someone to be a stakeholder, why wouldn't we want to nominate them to be a collaborator and committer?
It could be a path to that.
I think some people don't have time. Okay, let me make a very quick example. I would probably like Doug Wilson and somebody else from the Express team as a stakeholder in HTTP2. Okay, and if we had that back at the time, it would have been helped in some of the problems we ended up having later on when we ended up all the compatibility and stuff. So that's an exact example of a stakeholder that don't want to be a collaborator but still wants to be a stakeholder in a major feature because from one way or another they depend on it.
Okay, excellent. I'll work that into the definition, and I think that makes a ton of sense. Thank you, everyone.
So from the chat, since this is pretty relevant to this, I think. So Denshaw asks, do we need to invite the individual who's spearheading a mentorship initiative to a TSC meeting for feedback on, I guess, like updates? I think the question there is if someone is leading a strategic initiative that's not a TSC member, what do? Do we invite them?
I don't think it's I think the way these strategic initiatives are currently laid out, champions need to be TSC members, but I could be wrong about that. Miles, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that was something I was originally going to ask in the process, but currently all the people who have taken on champion roles have been TSC members. To me, that seems like it's weird because in the same way that being a stakeholder can be a path to being a collaborator, I see being a champion being a path to the TSC. But I'm not convinced right now that someone could be an effective champion without being a committer, because how are you actually moving the initiative forward? And I have somewhat of a similar inkling regarding stakeholders, but I don't want to block on that. So I'm comfortable personally with a champion being a non-TSC member as long as they are a collaborator. But I think that would have to be with the consensus of the TSC.
So a champion does not have to be someone doing work. Champion just has to be someone on the TSC who actually champions the initiative. And so if the TSC needs an update from someone who is not on the TSC, it is the champion's responsibility to invite that person as an observer. I would opt to punt this to the Q&A segment at this point. We have a bunch of things still to go through and a private segment. And I know that we're running out of time, but I also don't want to. I want us to be mindful of the time, but also want to squash conversation. So be cognizant of the time. Is there anything else before we move on?
Let's kick this to the issue. I think we've talked about enough about it today.
Yeah, GitHub seems like a good place for it. Okay. So there's next issue is TSC issue 311, which is document guidelines for accountability expectations for all members of the TSC and ComCom. Miles, you put it on the agenda. Do you want to let us know what sort of decision or action you're looking for here?
Yeah, so we originally created this as a way of thinking about increasing accountability. There's been some work done for this as far as like in the admin repo, we now have the member expectations doc, but I don't feel like this was fully followed through, as I believe part of what we wanted to see done here was improved moderation guidelines for leadership, which we don't currently have. That was something that was potentially going to, like, I thought was being tasked to the moderation group, but they have not, the moderation team has not taken this up. So I thought that it would be a good time for us to revisit and, come up with what are the guidelines of accountability for leadership in our team. Are we satisfied with where we are right now? And if not, what do we need to do and who are going to be the stakeholders who are going to move that forward? I will I'll use this.
Are you able to? I mean, is there some? So this sounds like a discussion. Is there a decision or an action here, or?
So I think the decision or action that we need to do as a committee right now is just, if people feel like we're good, then maybe there isn't more work to be done. I personally am pushing that we need to revisit this, and specifically around the moderation. And so I think what we need to do as a committee, the actionable bit for today, is decide, is this something that we want to officially task the moderation team with? And if we're not officially tasking the moderation team with it, then I would like to see us more actively pursuing this in the new year.
Okay, so on behalf of moderation, since let me see here. I'm just seeing if anybody in the moderation team is chiming in, but not in our Slack. Okay. So in general, the moderation team does not see itself as a group that creates policy. That said, a lot of members are very happy to recommend policy. Either as individual, more as individuals than as a group. So what I can do is I can take this back to the moderation group and see if there's something, see if it's something they want to take up or not. That's what I can offer.
Yeah, that works for me. And maybe I can just pose this to the TSC as a whole. And I know that I've been putting it, like, I was under the impression when we spun up the moderation team that this particular thing and recommending policy around it was one of the most important things that the moderation team was supposed to be doing. And so perhaps I was mistaken, and if other people think I'm mistaken, that's great. But if other people were under the same impression, this would be a good time to kind of chime in and maybe let me know.
That seems mistaken to me, because I am quite under the impression the moderation team is not there to particularly make policy, except for like internally so that they can deal with issues, but rather actually deal with issues that we already have policies for.
Okay.
I mean, maybe I'm wrong there too, but that was my understanding.
So if that's the case, then I think that the TSC needs to pick this up as an initiative. Rich, as the moderation champion, I would like to ask if this is something that you can follow up on.
Yes. Yeah, there's multiple prongs here. There's like figuring out if the TSC thinks we're good as is, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I will take that on. We'll leave this on the agenda, and I'll try to at least summarize something that will be either actionable or just here's some information, everybody, and go from there.
I'm more than happy to be a stakeholder and help drive this initiative.
All right, sounds good. Any other comments on this topic before we move on to the last agenda item? Okay, now that I'm unmuted, I'm going to say that again. Okay, great. Last issue is one I put on the agenda, and it's TSC issue number 284. Not all members of the GitHub org are members of the members team. If you look at that issue, Michael Rogers left a comment a long time ago explaining the members team, and based on his comment, I believe we should remove people from the members team if they are not in any other team. I'm going to do that unless there are objections, although I won't do it until the community committee has time to weigh in, to put this on their meeting agenda. I itemized some reasons in the issue why we shouldn't be shy about this. It's super easy to revert. If you can remove someone from the members team, you can add them again. We want to lock down the members team a little bit because it gives access to the moderation repo and some other stuff like that. So if anyone has concerns or objections, now would be a great time to raise them, or drop a note in that GitHub issue, and I'll stop talking so someone less talkative than me can weigh in if they have something to say.
Well, I'm not sure I'm less talkative than you. Is this something the automation team could maybe write a bot for that could crawl all of our teams, make a list, and then give us a list of all the people who are members that are not in any other teams? That seems like a useful tool that we could have, and something that we could just do as a periodic audit.
I imagine that's something they could do.
Instead of having something regular, could we do it once and then make the members team a top level team, which is the parent of all the other teams? So everyone will inherit the membership? Then nobody would be directly member of the team, but just member of it because they are member of other teams.
Love it.
I'm a huge fan of that. It seems like a very strategic initiative.
How would that work with external members?
I'm sorry, Nikita, can you say that again?
There is such a thing as external membership. How will that work with external members of some other teams?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm really sorry.
Give me a moment, please. I will just post a link, I think.
So we have a suggestion from the YouTube chat that GitHub with Probot could probably monitor the mentorship continuously, but it sounds like we won't really need that. So.
Yeah, I think Nikita is going to be typing up the question in the chat or something like that. But while we're waiting for that, perhaps it's time to check out, especially since there's only 10 minutes left, check to see if there's any questions, Q&A in the IRC or YouTube chats or anywhere, the Twitters or anywhere else that we tend to take questions from. While we're looking for those, I'll mention that the upcoming meetings for the entire project can be found at nodejs.org/calendar. Tomorrow, there is a Node.js and API team meeting. They apparently meet weekly at the exact same time. Then there's nothing until Tuesday when there will be a build working group meeting, and you can check nodejs.org/calendar to get the time in your local time zone. Of course, with the time zone change, it might not be Tuesday, it might be Monday, but or Wednesday or something. But there's also a diagnostics work group meeting a week from today. The TSC is meeting again a week from today. And with that, I'll stop talking and see if we have any questions. Do we have any questions?
There is a reasonably large discussion about the TSC and moderation working group from Disha and Tyranny, but I'm not really sure if there's a question in here or something we can really address.
I'm going to go back to Nikita's question. He says, I was asking how that would work with outside collaborators. And I don't know if there are outside collaborators in the members group, because then they wouldn't be outside.
I meant, what if some other group has outside collaborators? Oh, or does that work on repository level? Let me double check. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you can add outside collaborators to a repository, but it doesn't have to be in the members group.
So that the members team won't include any outside collaborators. Sounds good.
So I'm really interested in this discussion you mentioned, Jeremiah, but let's not try to.
I mean, you could probably look at it yourself if you went to the YouTube live stream.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the link actually. If you could post in the chat, that would be great.
Give me a second. So Tyranny asked if Forrest and Tracy could come to the next meet, or Forrest or I think Tracy come to the next meeting to discuss the moderation working groups kind of purpose, but there's a meeting already, which Disha pointed out from what was that, October the 25th, I think, TSC meeting, where Forrest gave a comprehensive overview of the moderation working group that already includes that. So if anyone wants to check that out, that's probably already described in detail there. And other than that, there's one comment, which is moderation policy, like governance, is one of those hard people issues that seems to be consistently falling off the TSC sphere of interest, which is probably kind of true.
Okay, I'm going to move that we adjourn this meeting and move to the private segment. Any objections? Can I get a second? please.
I think we're good. Yeah.